Spider-Man No Way Home is selling very, very well. Like we talked about, when the tickets went on sale Monday morning slash Sunday night, it crashed a lot of the ticket websites. And now that's been a couple days, it's been easier to get tickets. I know there are some cities, depending on where you live, where it's more difficult because, if you have a small town, you may have to drive a distance, or, in some places it's kind of sold out. It just depends. But one thing I'll tell people whenever there's a big movie coming out and you want to go to theaters, remember that try it like when you're going to buy your tickets to remember if you can't see it close by, if there's a town like an hour away, that might be worth doing, or a movie theater like half an hour away, because if it's really not that far for you, you can go there early in the day, kind of maybe check out a new restaurant, enjoy the day before you go see the movie. Like, you gotta remember that sometimes life needs to be pretty adventurous, and I like to go on adventures to new places. So if you're one of those people that is having that issue, try that. And if you're in the middle of nowhere, it might be a bit harder to get tickets for opening night or opening weekend. But point is that this thing is selling a lot. Now, some of my friends have been debating about whether or not No Way Home will defeat Endgame. I want to say a couple things before we talk about this. So, Avengers Endgame was a once-in-a-lifetime capstone movie. It was built up consistently since 2008's Iron Man, and one could argue that the MCU wasn't really established then, but the story of the arc of Tony Stark did go all the way back to that movie. So we had 11 years of build-up and like 22 movies before we got Endgame, including Infinity War, that had an amazing cliffhanger that many of us were waiting on bated breath to see how it would turn out, because it really seemed hopeless at the end of Infinity War. But we knew they'd figure something out, but we really weren't sure what. There were some leaks about the time travel stuff, we knew that was going to be a factor, but the way it was executed in the film, there were a lot of surprises. Endgame was a very special movie, and what made Endgame so special is that people kept going back to go see it. People oftentimes went back to go see this movie with different friends, with their families, sometimes alone. Sometimes they went to go see it in IMAX, Dolby, 4D, regular. Depends on, obviously, on how much money you wanted to spend, where you lived, all that kind of stuff. So it was an event movie. What Star Wars used to be and isn't really anymore. The MCU has kind of taken advantage of that. But I would actually say that the Phase 4 movies like Black Widow, Shang-Chi, and Eternals, they weren't really event movies. Spider-Man No Way Home is an event movie. I mean, you can't argue that. And it's a huge event. Even though they haven't confirmed it officially, the rumor of Tobey and Andrew being in this movie has been going on for a year and a half. And most fans, I think, that are buying this movie for the first couple of days think that they're coming in, right? We could safely say that. And I feel like even though Endgame was built up since 2008, you could make the argument, which it's not really a fair argument because it wasn't really a plan, but you could make the argument that if Tobey Maguire is in this film, along with, we know that Willem Dafoe is in it, it goes all the way back to 2002 and Spider-Man. So you've got kids that grew up watching Spider-Man 2002 that are now adults. You've got adults back then that were just getting out of high school, like me, and we're now in our 30s, and we're about to go see this thing. Different age groups. So this is going to be a movie where if Tobey and Andrew are in it, it's a generational movie. We got people, dude, that, like I said, getting out of high school, in their 20s, whatever, when the old Spider-Man movies came out. Some of them have kids now. So you're going to take your kids to go see it, your girlfriends, whatever, right? So this is going to be a movie, if it's a good movie, it's going to come down to whether or not it's a good movie, that people will see over and over and over again. Like with Endgame. Endgame was an amazing film. And it had to be. It had to be amazing. And with this movie, it has to be amazing. Yeah, it's going to get a lot, it's going to make a lot of money. Right. And without question, this is the biggest film since Endgame. The biggest one. Now, does that mean it's going to make more money than Endgame? Here's the thing. That remains to be seen. And honestly, I'm a bit skeptical. Yes, Spider-Man is the most popular Marvel comic book hero of all time. Decades of equity, right? Over half a century of equity. Yes, Spider-Man is generational. Yes, it's a big movie that will continue the Phase 4 story. Yes, it's part of the MCU. Yes, if Toby and Andrew are in it, which many believe that it is, that they are, you're going to have generations of people going to see it. So I can safely tell you that this movie will make the most money of any movie since Endgame, meaning it could do 1.5 billion, 1.2 billion, even 1.8 billion. But will it hit the 2 billion mark? Here's the thing. Avengers Endgame is a once in a lifetime film. Now, you could argue that Spider Man No Way Home is a once in a lifetime film also, but we're not going to know that until we go see the movie. I feel like when we all go see this film in a few weeks, when we go see this thing, I think we'll have a much better picture of whether or not this will be a record breaker or not. With Endgame, you kind of knew. We didn't know it would beat Avatar, but we knew it would do well. But we weren't really sure. With Spider Man, I think when we see the movie, how we feel about it, how people react to it, I think will really be a determining factor as far as whether or not this movie will actually be able to dethrone Endgame as being the $2 billion monster. I personally feel that because of the pandemic and now a scare of another variant or whatever, I feel like that's going to end up being an issue. In 2019, we weren't scared to go out, and I'm not scared to go out, but a lot of folks out there are. I mean, I know some of you guys have your opinions. I'm not going to get into that because it's political and we're not talking about that, but some people are just genuinely afraid to go out, and you can't blame someone for having anxiety of getting sick. You really can't. Some people have the anxiety. Don't laugh at them. They have reasons for this, and they're not going to go see it. They're going to wait till the Blu-ray or the streaming or whatever. Is that a mistake? Well, maybe. Or are they going to wait for a later showing, maybe when the theaters are more empty? That is possible. I think that some people are going to wait for maybe week 2 or week 3 when there's less people going. Pick like a Sunday afternoon or a Monday morning showing, a Monday afternoon showing, when there's not a lot of people, kids are in school or whatever, because they'll be back in school by January, and then they might go. You got to think about these things. So ultimately, I think that the people who aren't going, who really want to go, are going to end up going anyways at some point, but I feel like that first opening weekend is going to be huge. Will it be Endgame? I don't know. People are already writing articles that it could. We're going to see. I think this movie is probably the closest that it could come to doing it, but until they have another big Avengers film, if they even do, and even that might not. But this is a very special generational story, like what Star Wars used to be, and things like that. Even Superman movie and Batman movies usually do really well. But I think with the way that movie theaters have been declining because of these changeover to streaming, and of course the way the world is, I don't know if we're going to have a movie this big for quite some time. Honestly, I think it's going to be years. I think maybe the Batman will do really well, but I think it's going to be years before we have a movie like this. So, without question, yes, it's going to be a massive, massive, massive movie. It already is. It already is. People are going to get very wealthy off of this damn movie. But is it going to beat Endgame? I'm going to predict it's going to come close, but it won't. If you think I'm an idiot, I mean, that's kind of dumb because you got to recognize Endgame was a very special film. But if you disagree with me, that's fine. Like, no, geekdom, I think Endgame will get beat by Spider-Man No Way Home. That's fair because this is a serious thing. It's a big movie. And I don't think we should be yelling at each other over this because I think one way or another we're going to know. Like, this is one of those things that time will tell. We'll know within maybe 2 months max. We're going to know if this is going to beat Endgame. Or if it's trending to beat Endgame, we'll know that probably within a couple weeks of the movie's release. But I don't think it's going to do it. I think Endgame was very special, but I think it could. And one thing I'll tell you about Endgame is when I went to go see Endgame at my showing, the first one, it had lots of older people there, which was interesting. It wasn't just people in their 20s and 30s. There were people in their 50s there. So obviously these MCU movies hit an older audience. Spider-Man tends to trend younger, but you got to also remember Spider-Man has been around for a long time. All these heroes have, though. You can't really make that argument. So I think level playing field, if it wasn't for the pandemic, if that had never happened, I would feel a lot more comfortable saying No Way Home can win. But because of people's fears and all that stuff, some movie theaters never even reopened, guys. Some of the smaller ones never even survived this thing, guys. The businesses didn't survive. So And it's sad, but it's true. I'm not going to BS you. I'm not going to blow smoke up your ass. I'm a fan of all this stuff, but I'm not going to pick a side here. I'm going to look at things logically and say, no, I don't think it's going to beat Endgame, but I think 1.5. I predicted 1.5 billion. Now maybe I'm thinking more like 1.6, 1.7, maybe 1.8, 2 billion. I mean, that's dude. There's only one movie that hit 2 billion. Well, actually now it's two because Avatar kind of caught up, but that could change whenever they re-release Endgame, which, by the way, they are going to re-release Endgame in the theaters at some point. You know they will. You know they will. So Disney owns all this stuff, by the way. Well, this is technically a Sony movie, the Spider-Man movie, but Disney has Avatar and freaking MCU under their umbrella. But anyways, the point is, I don't think it'll win, but it'll come close. What do you think? Let me know down below, and we'll talk. We'll revisit this in a few weeks, maybe a month, and see what actually happened.